Greetings, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome everyone. I am, of course, Chief Yuya, and you are listening to the Sabbath Insight for today. I'm going to make this Sabbath Insight probably more of a mini insight because of various constraints. But I wanted to speak on something, and before I do that, let me welcome all of you who have never been to this experience before, or this channel, or who have no knowledge whatsoever of the ANU Life Global Ministries or the ANU Nation. I want to welcome you to the space and just let you know, you're welcome to return and return and return and return. We have a lot of good information that you may find useful for your journey, or you might even find that this is a community that you would like to be a part of or to support the work of. All right, if that's the case, be sure to visit ANU Life Global Ministries. The website will be in this video and above, right? So ANULIFEGLOBAL.org if you want more information, or you could even download some free resources as well. All right, so, I was having a beautiful conversation recently about the Anunnaki. And there were individuals who were asking me questions about, I guess we could say the nature, like what are the Anunnaki? What is the Anunnaki? And, it led me to want to share some things today in terms of our perception. A lot of times it's difficult for us to expand our understanding based on where we began and based on who took the time to originally program us. When we're dealing with concepts such as Anunnaki or, extraterrestrial form or Elohim or God, gods, however you might perceive it or define it for yourself, a lot of times our understanding is thwarted at a very early stage based on what level we're stuck at. And what I mean by that is, like, when you're going to school, let's say if you're learning mathematics, you're typically given very simple mathematics in the very beginning, because that's what you're able to process, and it's a step. And as you mature and as you gain more information and the ability to apply those mathematics, you go to level 2 or level 1. Then level 2, then level 3, level 4, level 5, so forth and so on. But it's still the same mathematics, but the formulas get more complex. So it could be similar to an understanding of one's relationship to a deity. Maybe there's a point in your journey where you may have trouble with complex concepts. So, in the beginning of your journey, you may hear a concept like God, and a singular monotheistic perspective may be a bit more palatable, for where your mentality is. Then as you develop and you expand, you may have an understanding that God and gods can be one and the same. Sort of like when we look at cloud computing. We refer to the cloud as the cloud, but the cloud represents a cluster of machines. And even within the clouds, you have some machines that are more powerful than others. You have some machines that serve as slave to another machine or provide redundancy to one computer. One computer may be performing certain processes, and it may split those tasks among several machines, but it may serve as the master clocking unit. And then you may have a system where a machine is just replicating the content and the data of another machine, or even the processes of another machine. But we look up and we say the cloud as if it's one thing. And then maybe as we mature, and like I said, as we become a little bit more complex in our thinking, we can say the cloud is a conglomerate of many machines. So just like we might say God when we're still learning and we're going through, and then as we begin to expand and understand more, we might then possess the ability to be able to say gods, right? And so when we say Elyon, or the Most High, we're speaking about the strongest God, the most powerful God among all the other ones, right? So some people, they get caught up. And honestly, some of that confusion is intentional. It's not always an instance where the tutelage of an individual has just been, uncompleted or incomplete. But sometimes you have certain factions in society that will say, well, let's change it around a little bit. A great example of that would be Ninti. When you look at the archetype of Ninti, you'll see the story that Ninti means the lady of creation, or the lady of the rib. And in ancient Sumer, when that story was told, prior to the Judeo-Christian story of Adam and Eve, it was Adam who was formed from the rib of Ninti, right? So later, of course, that became Eve coming out of, or being formed out of the side, or the rib of Adam, or Adoma. But even when you look at Ninti later on became Gabriel, the archangel Gabriel, who was said to be the giver of life. He represented strength, but he was also the giver of life, where an earlier form of Gabriel would be Ninti, right? Now, why not just teach the older story? And it's not to imply that just because something is old, it's correct. But if you derived your story from this story, why not teach it how it was originally taught in the Anunnaki texts? And I know that Anunnaki texts are probably not something that you hear very often in terms of writing. But in those texts, even if you read the Ulimic text, you will see that it is Ninti who forms Adam, or is, he is pulled from her rib, right? And I covered a lot of this. If you get an opportunity to watch the series I did on Who Are the Sky People, I think it would be very advantageous. And even if it's not information that you agree with, though it is written in the same tablets that most of your major systems came from, it may spark some thought, and that's always a good thing. The mind is so very important in all this process, and I'll get into that a little bit. There are so many different areas that are sort of left to explore, that we have opportunities to dig into once we start really giving ourselves some time to learn on our own and take that responsibility to comparatively research. And what I have found a lot of times when I am teaching and sharing, that sometimes the confusion that individuals suffer from is a result of them having this sort of monolithic view of what religions or spiritual systems are saying. They're really stuck in one religion, though they may have explored many others. They're exploring many others to strengthen and to support the viewpoint and the perspectives that they've been given from the one religious institution. So it would be like a Muslim or a Christian who travels the world learning different religions to strengthen their faith in Allah, which is fine. But first, let's understand who and what Allah is. Early Christian Arabs, they referred to their deity along with the Muslims. Early Arab Muslims, they both referred to their deity as Allah. Now, could you ever imagine telling a Christian, and this is historical, that, Christians before you who lived in another place referred to the God who you just call by a title, God, referred to that God as Allah, alongside the Muslims who you say you disagree with, right? So, it's very interesting when you start to explore and you can have your mind a bit more open. And in order to go to the higher levels of understanding in these systems and just in this general teaching, you have to have an open mind. And I have found consistently that's where most people discover their greatest challenge. because they're holding on to the life, and they don't want to go through that death transformation of maybe it's different than what I was told. Maybe it's different than how it was written. Maybe it's different than what my tradition has dictated. In biblical times, you had references to the Anak or the Anukim. They would be your Amorites. When you see that term Amorites, originally prior to that, those were the Anak or Anukim, or the children rather of Anukim. Those same individuals in the Phoenician were the Zamuzim or Zamuzim. And Zamuzim later became, in the Hebrew, Zayin. Zayin, people may know from the Hebrew alphabet, but in both languages, it meant weapon, right? So there are some very distinct and obvious connections between these various cultures that people are just not shown, and I feel it is intentional. And sometimes they don't take the time to go and learn, and I think that's also intentional. Sometimes people are deliberately lazy, when it comes to their scholarship, and it's like I could just carry around this one book in my phone or in my iPad or in my hand. You're telling me I have to have 15 to 20 books. Well, that's the thing. It's about survival in this time. And in order to survive, one has to become a legitimate scholar. This is not the olden times when we had such direct and apparent and deliberate contact with archetypes that the way was made very clear. Now the ways have been laid before us, and it's up to us to now dig in. And this was part of the science of the flood of Noah. We'll use the term Noah. But if you read the ANU Way, I gave you several original names and different titles for the archetype that we know in the Torah, who was named Noah. That flood story and flood hero is across many different systems. But you have this idea, again, that what we've sort of been given is very singular and it's very exclusive, without understanding. If you look into the Syriac or the Hebrew or the Arabic or the Aramaic, you'll find these corresponding terms and corresponding concepts and corresponding ideas. But you may have the idea a little twisted when you just have one system in front of you that someone gave you, and then that one system is held within the same cultural context that system was given to you in. Then it becomes a toxic religion, because you'll look at a word that's handed to you. Here's a word God. Here's a word Lord. Here's a word hell. And then you'll have cartoons and movies and books about God, Lord, hell, right? So it automatically strengthens whatever slant they're trying to imply to you. It's supported by the culture, the external culture to the religion. And at some point you realize there is no separation between church and state, because the state has defined what the ecclesiastical or the church will be for you, right? So you have to take it upon yourself to say, I'm going to study this beyond what has just been handed to me, because that's the only way I'm going to live. One of the aspects of the conversation that we were sort of exploring together was the return of the Anunnaki. I have to say the return of the Anu, because if you're Anunnaki, you're already here on the earth, by definition. And in fact, many of us are Anunnaki. It's just, again, within a cultural context, we've been given that word, and you say Anunnaki, and then you immediately tell, you're talking about the reptilians, you're talking about the evil establishment. No, we're talking about the ones who came from heaven and who are here on earth. And some have the ability to move through fifth dimensional portals, and some have advanced biological features, some have advanced technological features, and some don't even know what the heck they are, right? These are all Anunnaki. So a lot of times, again, within a science, or I should say a cultural science, an architect, these thoughts are twisted, these ideas are twisted around as to what's really happening. Again, like we look at the term Zayin, as mentioned before, that was always a term that was used for protection. one would draw it 7 times. And if they were traveling, they would hold it in their right hand. And it was a weapon. It would provide protection for them. Or they would put it in certain parts of the house, in particular like the front area. You would typically call that your foyer area. And later we said, okay, well, that's where you put your Eshu, or you put your Yangi stone, but you can put your Eshu Elegba, or your Eshu Ode, depending on how your foyer is established. I don't do any of those things because I don't need to. I'm much more powerful than, charms. Okay, so before before anybody puts in the comments, Chief, where are you supposed to put that again, and what you supposed to write on it? I'm not gonna give you any energy on that. Again, this is about survival, and the charms that we used in yesteryear don't work today. They may affect slight little change here and there, but you have to build your ojiji, or your aura, up to the point that you realize through your mental connection, your ability to connect with the Elohim and have conversation with the Elohim, that I have much more resources available to me without the need for so much rote and routine sacrifice. And I know it's like I was sharing, we may not have as many direct experiences with these different entities and divinities, if you will, that live on the planet. And some of them you don't want to contact, in truth. That's the last thing in the world you want to do, is contact some of them, because some of them mean you no good. They mean you no good whatsoever. And you might be calling and pulling on them. And it's very similar to the movie Prometheus at the end, where David the android meets the architect, and the architect knocks his head off his shoulders. He's like, why was I created? And he's looking at him like, you're like scum on the bottom of Enlil's boot. Please. Like you're a hybrid of a hybrid of a hybrid of a hybrid. It's very important to understand that in the universe, all things have a source. But in order to survive, all things change from what they were at their source. That's the essence of evolution. So, even us as people, there was a time where you had, and you can read Frantz Fanon's book on that one. Frantz Fanon, I think, did a very, very good job of breaking down the different formations of humans. Of humans. Not Frantz Fanon. I mean Sheikh Anta Diop. Sheikh Anta Diop. But read Frantz Fanon's book too. That's also a good book, Wretched of the Earth. Very good book, Frantz Fanon. But Sheikh Anta Diop, he did a very, very thorough, I feel, job of breaking down the different forms of humans that were once on the planet, but sometimes, again, through your religious understandings and through media propagation or propaganda, you have these images of like how we look and move and speak and think and reason today is how people did thousands of years ago or millions of years ago. And you may not understand that there's an evolution that takes place, and sometimes there's a de-evolution that takes place. But you might have these higher entities that are like, look, you were the Neanderthal, you were the ape man, and we mixed, ourselves with you to raise you up so that you would be more competent slaves. And then when all of these weird, funky experiments went so bad, we sought to wipe you out. And then a more benevolent one of us saved some of you. And then when you were saved, we said, okay, we'll start a new promise, a new covenant of your slavery again. Let's try it again. You see? And when we come back for you, we're only coming back for the best ones. And then the rest will be incinerated. Consider that as a thought for a second. If you could again sort of get out of a cultural vision of what happens when the mothership returns for what, and for everything, for everyone, or for the best ones, for the righteous ones, and the righteous ones in particular who have evolved to the level that they should. What happens to everything else? It gets incinerated. It gets incinerated. I will return with fire. I will incinerate the rest of the experiments that just didn't want to evolve or reach their potential. So our ability to become scholars and to study is not just about walking around and flexing our intelligence, but rather it's to survive to the next place. And I know it's difficult to maybe think about that, because some of us think that the Anunnaki's experience appearances, I'll say, are rare, but it's because sometimes you don't know what to look for. Years ago, they would call them divine visitations or heavenly manifestations, when they would see these formations of light, and sometimes they would describe them as it would be these bright formations or bright bursts of light, and eventually these particles of light would form themselves. They would compress themselves down into a humanoid form. And they would see these sort of, in older days, when they had these, they also called them mystique ufologists, mystique ufologists. But when they would have these heavenly manifestations or these divine visitations, they recognized, yeah, this is something from another dimension forming a light cell in this space, sort of like projecting a picture across the room, and depending on the dimension it's in, it's going to take the form of what's most understandable in that dimension. I mean, it's pretty simple, if you will, to think that there could be an electroplasmic body that forms. For your ability to see it is not so complex. I mean, we have holographic concerts right now. Whitney Houston has been on tour for a while now. And I know there was a Tupac tour as well. Those who buy the rights to these people's images, it's interesting. That may be another conversation, that whole science and how it's only one company, one individual really buying the rights to all of these deceased individuals and doing these holographic tours. And that's why you always see the new movies come out, Lifetime movies on this one, or the books, because someone is just making money off of an old hologram. But in essence, that is what holograms are very important, or the understanding of a holographic universe or holographic mind. Like I was saying, a lot of times our understanding of these different concepts, it wanes based on our devotion to a certain culture. Sometimes when you're children, we can learn these different things about multiple entities and the place that they serve and the whole pantheon of evolution. But then as we get older, we get scarier. We wake up, our back hurts, or our feet hurt, or we have a health scare. Then we run into the nearest, most confident cultural religion. And that's what we stick to. Whether we have studied a word of it or anything, we don't care. They seem confident, I'm going over there. Like I was saying, but if you take a little bit of time to study, like hell is a very good example of hell is worth studying. Just like heaven is worth studying. We have very few description of hell or the Lord of hell, even the Lord of the underworld, and modern day Judeo-Christian sort of delivery. You had Dante's Inferno, which was really a book that spoke about the various levels of hell. And most of our understanding, our descriptive understanding from a Western Anglo-Saxon cultural context, actually comes from that book, not from the Torah or, the Helios Biblios, the holy books. It doesn't actually come from there. It comes from Dante's Inferno. But if you were to look at the ancient Sumerian concept of hell and how that was represented, you would find that it's much, much different than maybe what it later turned into, right? There was always a concept of an afterlife, but the afterlife was more of a dimension rather than a reward or a punishment. There were rewards and punishments that may have been there based on how one had lived their life, but it was essentially another dimension. And but that Ulamic or that Ulamite or Anunnaki term, which we find in the Arabic, where we have Jahannam, Jahannam being a form of, or Jahannam being a form of hell or a word for hell. We have that in our Arabic. Sometimes it's also called Gehinnom. Gehinnom is another term that was translated into hell. So I don't want to say it's a word for hell, because sometimes when we do that, we maintain the concept of something, and we equate everything to that concept when that shouldn't really be the case. In the Hebrew, you have Gehenna, and you can look these words up. These are not like secret words per se, but in the Hebrew, especially in the Newer Testament, the what was translated as hell was actually Gehenna. And it's important when you start to understand like this Ulamite concept of Jahan or Jahannam or Gehenna, or in the Hebrew they also say Gehinnom, Gehinnom or Gehinnom. It's different, but you can see it's the same word sort of put across the Aramaic, put across the Arabic. I mean, in Dante's Inferno, it was called the Inferno. So Inferno or Gehenna or Gehinnom. But all of these different concepts that used, all these different major religions had this concept that in the word would be translated into hell. But there was an older Anak word, Jahan, where all of these words came from. And even the Hebrew, which was used, which was the Gehenna that was used in scriptures, wouldn't really translate into what today's concept of hell that you might get from maybe a misunderstanding of the King James Bible. I would say Yahushua HaMashiach walked the planet in the physical. That word Gehenna was a reference to the Valley of Hermon. And the Valley of Hermon was a place where they would dump garbage. It was a giant garbage heap. So Gehenna, as referred to that, it would be like, man, you wasting your life away, man. You're gonna end up in the garbage heap, or you're throwing your life away, or as you say, music, the beat was trash, but yeah, like you're trashing your life, you're throwing your life away. According to our Ulima sort of studies, there is no heaven or hell, but rather just various dimensions that individuals would go to where they would exist mentally. And there are dimensions for humans, there are dimensions for animals, and there are dimensions for various life forms, right? Now, this is an older view, and of course the Uluma or the Elema sort of view, a lot of the Islamic scholars sort of formed an understanding around studying these various traditions, and that became sort of the Uluma sort of, or Elema sort of council. But these are older views, they just sort of pulled them together, as Islam really is. I mean, sure, Islam is older than the Prophet Muhammad. I mean, Muhammad came and gave an offering of understanding and interpretation and breakdown, but truly, ancient Islam is a bit different than modern Islam. No different than ancient Israelite culture is much different than modern day Hebrew culture. So, like when I speak about the ancient perspective and understanding of this dimension of Genome or Kahana, which later became known as, well, not even known, but later I would honestly say mistranslated as hell. It was a sojourn through the fourth dimension. And those who lived a righteous life would be reunited with their loved ones. This is very similar to the Nordic understanding of Valhalla and being in the halls of Valhalla. If I die a good death, or if I die with my sword in my hand, if I die on the battlefield, if I live the life of a good person, then when I die, I will be reunited with my loved ones, and with my other comrades who have fallen or who have lived a similar righteous life, right? So that concept was not exclusive to Viking culture. That concept was also present on the Kibalan, or the continent that is commonly referred to as Africa. But the most important thing is that reunion was not a physical one, because if the body were to die, then what exactly is burning in hell, right? Or what exactly is experiencing this heavenly paradise? It wouldn't be you in the physical. Your physical is either cremated or lost somewhere. You got a cement block tied to your ankle at the bottom of the river, or you're in a grave somewhere. So we know that the experience that is described as hell, the burning and the suffering and these things, are not a physical thing. And in the same instance, the pleasure that we speak about that comes from this perfected or perfect heavenly existence, where there's no rain or snow, there's no crying, there's no sorrow, so forth and so on, couldn't possibly be a physical experience, but rather a mental one, because the body is no longer there. So you start to understand, and that would mean that those who have transitioned to the other side, they have the ability to project holographic images and to receive or see holographic images of others. So you get this sort of ancestral holographic universe, right? Where these different mental holograms are interacting with one another, but it's not in the physical. But that also means that these things are happening across dimensions. There's a multi-dimensional projection. So that's why if you do certain work, if you do certain ritual or a certain sort of meditation, you can have a conversation with an ancestor, because that projection of, now this is the mind that I have attuned throughout my living experience. It's strong enough now that I can project it across dimensions after I transpire. You have like an example of this, and this, it may not be relative to some of you because you may not be aware, but like there was a cartoon years ago called the Thundercats, and there was an individual by the name of Jaga. Jaga was like their elder. He was their king at one point, and he died, and but he had the ability to project himself, almost like a holographic form, into the physical universe, right? That would be an example of that for any people who remember that cartoon. Another example of that would be in the Star Wars franchise, where you had Obi-Wan Kenobi had the ability to project himself from the ancestral realm by using the Force, or Ashe. Master Yoda had the same ability, and Anakin, who we know as Darth Vader, also had the ability to do that after he transpired, right? So this concept of being able to project yourself through real essence and form a molecular sort of presentation of yourself, and you're just like the original with the same genetic qualities and everything, but just not physical, right? This was a concept of Ganan, or again, what was later I'll just use the term the afterlife. So in the afterlife, you'll have all your mind, but not your physical senses, right? So if you were to experience the 7 levels or the 7 dimensions of pain, it would only be experienced in a physical sense, right? If you were to understand that there are different properties and different structural forms of people and of animals and things like that, all of that understanding would exist within the mind. Now, it probably sounds like one of the Hermetic laws, right? The mind is all, all things are comprised of the mind. Well, there is a very strong realism that even when we get to the afterlife, based on ancient teaching. So you might say, no, that's not true. My body's going to reassemble somehow when I die, and I'll have my physical properties. Okay. I am never interested in taking anyone's faith or belief away from them. Never. But if you come to me and you ask me a question, if you come to me to learn, then I'm most likely I'm on a seek and destroy mission. I am really seeking to destroy whatever strongholds or falsehoods are already implanted within your psyche. And I do that unapologetically. You may walk away like, I can't even think straight. Good. But if it's unsolicited, then you could always skip. So we understand that in the afterlife, those who we would call ancestors, or those who have transitioned, all of their suffering occurs in the mind, right? And the pain sensations are very real. It's the mind is where you experience it all, but they're produced by the mind instead of the physical body. It's not like there's an electric signal sent up through the nervous system to tell the brain, hey, you just stubbed your toe or you just burnt yourself. All of those sensations happen within the mind. So it's very important in this time, while we're still here in the physical, to master the mind as much as possible. So this is why you hear me speak about Zen and Ori and self-actualization, self-mastery, and all of these sort of concepts, because they become even more critical, when we speak about where we might transition to. Now, when we talk about the wicked now, the wicked were always considered to not be able to reunite with their family, or not reunite with their loved ones. And they would go through this state of chaos. They would go through this state of isolation and this state of sort of this mental disordering and the state of confusion. And they would do that for the amount of time that it would take for them to become rehabilitated. So it wasn't a punitive experience for the wicked, where it's like, now you're just going to burn. Now you're just going to, relive this moment, and it's going to be the pain for the rest of your life. But rather, it was considered in ancient times that this was a part of their rehabilitation, and it could last for a really long time, but it was not eternal. So even those who would go into the afterlife and would have to suffer and would have to go through their rehabilitation, and who would not be reunited with their loved ones, and who would go into isolation, and their sort of mindset mental plane would be inhabited by all of these different images of pain, which would feel like some sort of punishment, of course, that these entities that would be created within the subconscious of the wicked person, they would not be with them there forever. That was always the understanding that was provided to our elders. And sometimes those sort of images are produced, like some of us have those images now. You close your eyes, because many of us have a double mind. You close your eyes and you see grotesque things. You see monstrous things, and there are many people who do not like quiet because of that. There are many people I know who do not even like to sleep because of the nightmares that they experience. They like a lot of noise. They like to leave, videos playing and stuff while they're sleeping. They sleep with the lights on, so many different things, so that they can try to keep themselves from going into the deep subconscious where their actual purification lies. So it's the same instance, when you're talking about the afterlife in ancient times. If you were wicked, you would go through a purification process. So either you will be reunited with your loved ones, and you can rock out, whether it's the halls of Valhalla or wherever, or you would go through a purification. And however long that takes is however long it would need to take. But I know there are many who will listen to this and will just say, well, what about soul? And not understand that the soul, or the Ba, is certainly a real thing. But in this time period, the gateway to all of those real things and those ethereal things are your mind. So you would do better off cultivating the mind. And a lot of people skip that part because they want the feelings of what they call the soul, Well, I had a vision and I had a dream and I just follow my gut. And they just stick right there because they're too lazy to learn. They're just too lazy to learn. They can't be bothered with it. So they look for easy ways out. Everybody can have a dream. You're not really saying anything. It's not that special. You know, everybody can have a vision. Everybody can stare in the water and be like, I saw an image. We all can do that. It's not impressive because half the time, 98% of the time, you just made it up. It's not even real. Or you're mentally off and you're seeing things that really aren't there. And I'm speaking to you as someone who is psychic and someone who does deal with that world and has spent many years in the shadow realm. A lot of people are not there. But it's very easy for you to say you are there, and who can disprove it? Who can say you didn't see what you saw? But your life and the fruits that you bear prove it. And when you really have gone into those realms, you know the spirit that spills off of a person who has also been in those realms. I give you a great example. I know a lot of people who do like ayahuasca, and I know those who also do ayahuasca ceremonies. I have never done ayahuasca a day in my life. I have never done any psychedelics. I have done other things, but not for the purpose, when I was younger, let me put the disclaimer there, but not for the purpose of subconscious and spiritual and soul and astral journeying. I don't need to. And everyone that I know who does those sort of ceremonies, who have experienced them, many of them have assumed that I have done the same thing. A lot of people say, of course you've done ayahuasca, because the insight that you have and the things that you see are like the things that I saw. Right, because I've been in that realm. So because you've now been in that realm, you interact with me and you're like, well, he has the aura of someone who's been in that realm. But we can get through different, I didn't actually, maybe that person didn't either, but didn't know. I didn't need to use those things to enter into that realm, but I've been in that realm. So I can tell who's been there, who's not been there. And sometimes, not just because you've taken ayahuasca, now you're a sage, but some people can also tell it, can see it on other people as well. A lot of people that they'll focus on, what about the soul? And not understanding that a lot of times the concepts of what the soul is and the perception was created by people to explain what they didn't understand, or to explain places that they weren't able to get into. And like I said, cultivating the mind is a much more difficult process as opposed to celebrating the joy of your soul. Oh, my soul, my soul, my soul. I feel it, I feel it, I feel it. That's a religious experience. We can get happy, we could jump up and down, we could dance, we could fall out, but that's not the same as taking 8 religions and putting 8 religions in front of you and reading the text of those religions for the next 15, 20, 30 years. While at the same time having love, joy, compassion, and all of these different things in your heart, and having a connection with your El. And I'll use the term El. I know it's a Canaanite term. The Canaanites, they would either say Baal or they would say El. And just like the Hebrews would say Yahuwah or Yahweh, different terms, but they are talking about different entities, But when you have an understanding, and I was just using hell as an example, your connection to certain feelings or soul feelings don't exist because they only exist within the dimensions of this world, not in the dimensions of the afterworld. So you got to be careful what you might be investing your time in, because after this space where we're supposed to be preparing for the next, after this space, you might be like, man, I was investing in the wrong thing this whole time. I was investing in good vibes in my ego and my spirit, and I should have been investing in the gateway so that I can maintain my consciousness when I go into the next space, so I can project myself where I need to project, and I can be reunited with those who are the ascended masters and my loved ones. I don't want to go through the purification rites after I've already was supposed to go through the purification ritual being a human. I don't want to do it again, And there's a lot of information on like the concept of the underworld or the duat or the afterlife or Jahan as it was called, you can definitely check out the descent of Ishtar. And these are stories that were written in clay tablets, but we're in the information age, so you don't have to know how to read ancient Akkadian anymore. I bet you probably, if you Google it, you'll probably see like 100 sites pop up with some of these stories that and it's always good to read different translations just to make sure you're not being given an okie doke. But you can read the Dream of Enkidu, which is will give you some explanation. Then there's there's the Sumerian descent of Inanna, the descent of Inanna to the netherworld is the name of it. You can check that out as well, and there's several other ones that and that will give you different understandings or a different perspective, older perspectives of what the underworld may have looked like, and all of these different perspectives, they do exist before Dante's Inferno or some of your more modern day descriptions of that world. You could also even check out the Halupu tree. That's another good one, the Halupu tree, to get some kind of understanding. There's also the Vision of Kuma. The Vision of Kuma you can check out. That's an Assyrian story, the Vision of Kuma. So, there are various understandings of who the Anunnaki are, and I'll explore some more as we go, because I said going forward, I wanted to really speak about the mind of Anu. Then I want to get into some anthropological teachings, but in order for you to really embrace them and appreciate them, you're going to have your mind widened up a little bit. And if you automatically think of Anunnaki and think of us being created to be slaves, and you don't want to move from there, it would be difficult to understand some of these things. I will say this: there were times when I felt the things that my parents did were unfair. When I was a small child, and some of the things, the chores they would have me do, or the rules they would have for me, I felt were unfair. But I didn't know what was good for me at that time. I didn't know what was needed to keep the machine of the family going. And sometimes, if you let enough time go by and enough mythology be inserted, the concept of a slave could just be the words of a spoiled, rebellious child who didn't really understand what the Elohim were actually up to. They made us do this, and then they made us do that, and they made us do this and that and that. We were slaves. And I'm not saying that the concept, and we can explore some of that, but it's, again, I urge you to go back and watch who are the sky people. It will give you a good understanding of that. So I'm not saying that narrative or that reality is an impossibility, that we were here mining gold and making food for people that we call burnt offerings, but we all weren't doing that. And in the same instance, it's difficult when you look at the Anunnaki or the Elohim as a monolith. That's what Western society tries to get you to do, to fool you. It's just like I said, if you look at cloud computing and think like it's just one big giant computer in the sky, and not understand that it's a multiplicity of entities. And when you sort of mature the emotional perspective and your vision on this, then you can actually see them. But it requires that. So if you just stick on that, we were enslaved, then you won't really be able to see that sometimes there's decisions that are made by more intelligent and more responsible entities who happen to be more elite, and those decisions are necessary for the survival of all. And they are made to sustain the stability of our existence. And that may be difficult to understand, that decisions often come from people who are superior to us, whether they be in the sky or whether they be inside the earth or whether they be inside the water. But sometimes there are decisions that are made that we don't understand. And there are certain entities who are capable of maintaining the law. And as those of us who are living a very human sort of existence, we tend to be very rebellious. And through our rebellion or our focus towards self-interest on a personal, very personal level, we remain sort of negatively charged towards greed, towards violence, towards selfishness, towards materialism, so forth and so on. But those who would have created us would know us best and would know how we could be redeemed best. We'll speak about that in coming segments, the redemption, but just understand that we were created millions of years ago before we used the word God. That's a new word. That is a new word. And there are, just like humanity is not a monolith, we should never imagine that the Elohim are a monolith. There are different, even though we say, well, race is a social construct. Yeah, but there are genetic differences throughout the planet. There are genetic differences on an extraterrestrial level. There are genetic differences. All right, so we'll speak about the role and the future landscape as I may see it, and you're more than welcome to agree or disagree respectfully. But the future landscape of what humanity may look like and our possible existence among other worlds, even, in other dimensions, and the ability of some to sort of portal in and out of these various dimensions, and the names that we ascribe to them that may not totally always be accurate, or the sense of unconditional love that we assume that they have for us, all of them, which may not totally be accurate. You might go into a company, and when you get to the front door, the receptionist is just super cool, super helpful, but the security's a jerk. They say, oh, go up to the third floor, da 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 da. You want something to drink? And you like, oh, cool. You get to the third floor, and there's a security guard there standing by the elevator, who profiles you. Or the receptionist upstairs is a jerk. Welcome to the world of the Elohim. Some of them are super cool, some of them are jerks. And unfortunately, through religious misunderstandings, they're all given one word: God. All right, so that has been our segment. And willfully, understanding has been sparked. Understanding comes when you apply the wisdom. So that process of understanding, a will that has been sparked, and you'd be able to now go forward and do some exploration and some digging and some studying on your own. And I want to thank all of you who left comments. I think I replied to everyone on the last video. If not, I'll go back and double check, man. Like I said, I always really appreciate the feedback. I'm an old schooler in the sense that I've always taught in person, and for the past 14 years, been teaching online, and it is a different experience. And you would think by now I'd be like, oh, it's just what it is, but there's nothing like gathering. There's nothing like gathering, man, and being able to kick it and teach in person and get feedback. That's why I opened up the ANU retreats to people who are not even in ANU, so that they could experience some of that. And sometimes it's not even as much teaching that happens, but it's a vibe, and you get a sense of that if you go back and watch who are the sky people. That was at a retreat. You see the tents are around, and we're all like, kind of, we got our outside camping gear, so nobody's really like dressed up nice. I think I might have like 4 shirts on. But it was a good time. It was a beautiful experience, and I look forward to the next one. But with that said, I am Chief Yuya and Chief Jugna of the Anu Nation and Anu Nation. All right. And I want to thank you all for tuning in, man. Make sure you stick around and subscribe for more stuff that's coming forward. Like I said, we're going to start exploring the world a little bit in these teachings. We're going to start exploring the world. And I'm going to start to show you how the web of Anansi has connected all of these different these different children. Because one of the translations for Elohim is children, the powerful children. Yeah. You'll see. You'll see. All right. So until such time, Shabbat Shalom. Be well, be at peace, and be loving to as many people who you can be loving to. All right. Shalom.